All right. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel. I'm the poetry coordinator here in Clark County, Nevada. I know that right now we have a lot of folks here that are not from Clark County. So, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have folks from all over joining us here. I want to just thank you for joining us for our Inkwell Poetry Workshop this month with Professor Geoffrey Babbitt. Today's workshop titled Getting More Out of Less, Lyrical Concision, Line and Image in Poetry, will explore how we can use line breaks, and imagery to apply torque and to give our poetry verbal energy and create linguistic chain reactions. So really help it pack a punch, right? Before we begin, just like I always do, I like to remind all attendees that this workshop is being recorded and it's going to be posted on our county website and some clips to our social media accounts occasionally. So by participating in the workshop, you agree to be included in these recordings. We will have a Q&A segment at the end of Professor Babbitt's presentation, as well as an opportunity for attendees to, create your own poems based on some prompts. I know that a few of y'all are traveling right now, and that's totally okay. We'll make it work. We make it work on the fly here. And if you'd like to ask any questions along the way, or you want to make a comment, you can feel free to use the raise hand feature here on WebEx, or you can also drop it in the chat. I'll be kind of monitoring the chat so we make sure we get to everything. So I would like to just take a moment here just to introduce our March Inkwell Poet Mentor, Professor Geoffrey Babbitt. He is the author of A Grain of Sand in Lambeth, winner of the 2023 Betsy Joyner Flanagan Prize in Poetry, and it was published by University of Nevada Press in December of just this last year, as well as his other collection, Appendices Pulled from a Study on Light. His poems and essays have appeared in North American Review, Pleiades, Colorado Review, Diagram, Notre Dame Review, Washington Square, Guest House, Cincinnati Review, and elsewhere. So very well published poet for us this month. Professor Babbitt holds an MFA and a PhD from the University of Utah and serves as editor of Seneca Review and Seneca Review Books, for which he founded the Deborah Tall Lyric Essay Book Prize. He lives with his partner and their 3 children in the Finger Lakes region of New York. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Professor Babbitt so he can get us started this morning. Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and just make you the presenter so you can share your screen, okay?
Great. That sounds wonderful. Oh, looks like we have another person joining us as well, actually. So we have Winnie, Elizabeth, and Denise, or she goes by Nisi, right? Is that correct?
Nisi is how I know her. Nisi is one of our wonderful local Clark County poets. She's actually going to be working with us on some stuff in April. So welcome, Nisi. So good to have you here. All right, I'm going to mute myself so that Professor Babbitt can take over. But yeah, take it away.
Fantastic. Great. I realize some of you who I know we have one person on the train. I'm not sure if everyone can speak freely, but if not, then feel free to add things into the chat whenever. Feel free to interrupt, ask questions. I feel like this is all very casual, and your interaction is more than welcome. I wanted to start by thinking about imagery and images, in part because I think it's the kind of thing where people kind of think, well, intuitively, of course I know what an image is and therefore what it does. But I think that if you kind of start putting a little bit of pressure onto that concept, you'll find that, I don't know, it's probably more interesting than many of us give it credit for being until we start paying a little bit of a closer attention to it. So we're going to look at some images in poems that I think are using imagery in a particularly compelling way. But before we even get to that, I wanted to just start with your own impressions of images. And when I say image, does anyone want to chime in with, like, what do you think of when you hear image? What is your understanding of image? It doesn't necessarily have to be a definition. It could be an example. It might be a tendency of what images, when they tend to appear, or what they look like. But yeah, I would love to hear what people think in terms of, when I say image, what comes to mind exactly. You're welcome to chime in verbally, or just type things directly into the chat, whatever feels best. But if you're hesitant to chime in, that's fine too. We can go ahead and talk about all this stuff without you needing to chime in. Let me see. Do we have any?
I don't mind chiming in. It's just going to be a bit
Okay.
odd for
Yeah, that
my
would be great.
fellow passengers. I guess I immediately think of maybe a drawing, a photograph, or even, I don't know, visually what I'm seeing inside my head.
Yeah.
Illustrations.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's something visual, right? And I think that's I think that's probably something that we would all probably agree upon, that it's visual in some way. Of course, then I think that if that's true, and I mean, I think that's absolutely right, then what does it mean for an image to be in poetry? If poetry is made entirely of words, then where is the image? I mean, so Elizabeth, you used the phrase something you see in your head. I think that's one potential answer to this question. And then I think that raises more questions though, right? Because are images, are they the words that provoke the image in one's mind, or are they actually the image in one's mind independent of the words? I don't know, which is it? Or is it a combination of both somehow? I don't know. What do you all think?
I think sometimes it's like sensory details.
Okay.
You know, that can be internal, but also what I'm seeing, and then metaphor comes in as well.
Metaphor. Okay, good. Elizabeth, this is fantastic. You're going to all the places I was hoping to go. I'm sorry, I spoke over you there for a second. I apologize.
No, there's somebody talking over a tannoy system, so.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned metaphor. And you also said sensory appeal, I believe, and I think that's tremendously important. So I guess in some ways, well, going back to the question that I posed, I want to touch on that before we come back to this notion of metaphor that you raised, which is fantastic. But I think it's interesting because we're talking about something with a primarily something related to the senses, especially visual, but something that has a visual function, but that is installed in language, in a linguistic medium. And so if we say the image is what people see in their minds, which is in fact the most visual way of accounting for imagery, then the problem is if we have 100,000 different readers and they all see 100,000 slightly different things in their heads, then does that mean that one image of poetry actually is really 100,000 different things rather than just one same image? And because of that, the kind of theoretical and critical conversation on imagery, it has been to get away from the reader response or what the reader pictures and kind of more toward the function, the verbal function that provokes the image. But then, Elizabeth, you mentioned metaphor, and I think that's interesting. So if we take something like, we'll say Shakespeare, and in the famous scene when Romeo goes up to Juliet's balcony and he says, "'Tis the east and Juliet is the sun." Okay, so that's a clear metaphor. But I guess which part of the metaphor is the image? Is it the literal part, Juliet seeming so absolutely radiant to Romeo that he thinks to compare her to the brightest celestial body in our galaxy? Or is it actually the figurative bit, the sun, rather than Juliet, or is it all of the above? I'm curious what people think here.
Well, we got a few extra thoughts on this in the chat
Okay.
too. I'll just read
Oh,
off because I know we have a
fantastic.
couple folks that can't read and from where they're talking to us from. Nisi
Great.
says that, you know, I find it difficult sometimes to create imagery that doesn't stray into cliche territory. You know, I think Shakespeare did it. I think Shakespeare like covered so much ground when it comes to metaphor that like he almost like he kind of he made it so that a lot of the rest of us sound cliche when we do it. She also says, I've been challenging myself to use unrelated nouns as verbs.
That's
Winnie
great.
said, for me, when reading, at least the words act as an anchor, and that is a starting point that builds the visual.
Mhm. I love
Yeah,
that.
so
That's yeah. I love all of this. This is great, Winnie. I love the idea of language as an anchor, and I often think of imagery as acting. I often say like ground your poem, keep it grounded in imagery when I'm teaching, and so that sense of anchor is very close to that. And anyway, so all of these comments are fantastic. I think you're all approaching thinking of imagery in interesting ways in terms of cliche. I mean, there's an old English professor joke about like a first year student saying, "Why does Shakespeare write in so many cliches?" Because he coined these things, they were original and they've since become cliches. So yeah, avoiding that and using fresh, interesting, original language is essential to having a successful image. Elizabeth, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's using language to evoke feelings. So, you know, if we're wanting to make it sensory,
Mhm.
whether it's smell, taste, touch, even
Ah,
memory,
okay.
um, that's how we help to with words
Excellent.
by evoking feeling to bring about poetry as well.
That is fantastic. And I think you are spot on. I think a lot of people hear imagery and they automatically think visual only. But Elizabeth, you are absolutely right that it's more than just the visual. That is anything that language that appeals directly to our senses is imagistic language. And it could be, as you said, it could be olfactory. I mean, if I mentioned the smell of freshly baked bread in, you know, your grandmother's kitchen, that would evoke a sensory response from you in some way. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to be visual. Anything that appeals directly to the senses counts as imagery. And Elizabeth, you also had another component that I thought was quite interesting. Did you say feeling or emotion? That it kind of,
I
um,
did.
yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that you're right that, I don't know, is it an absolute requirement that all imagery evoke something emotional? I don't know. I think that's an interesting question, but I think
It,
it
it help
often
it
does.
help it helps to enrich the experience,
Absolutely. And
deepen it. Yeah.
images, I mean, even the one of freshly baked bread in your grandmother's kitchen, not a particularly excellent image in and of itself. And yet, if that resonates at all with anything from your childhood, or perhaps there's a completely different smell. I'm in the Western United States right now, in Utah, where I went to graduate school and lived for a number of years, but I've been living in the East Coast in the state of New York. And while I've been here, I've been seeing a lot of sagebrush, which I haven't seen for quite a long time. But it was surrounded me where I grew up. I was speaking with an artist yesterday, and we were talking about the smell after rains after it comes down in the desert and rains upon the sagebrush. And rain interacting with sagebrush is one of the best um, smells I can possibly think of, and I think that I've ever experienced in my life. But it also is a result of the fact that I tie it to certain experience of when I was young, when I was growing up, or even when I was like a young adult in graduate school. It carries a lot of associations with it that have a kind of an emotional resonance to them. So absolutely, I think it can be very evocative of feeling, emotion. Elizabeth, I see you put in the chat nostalgia, and I think all of these things are completely true. I think what I'd like to do is to just look at a couple of poems that are using imagery, and we can kind of talk about them. I'm trying to think which one we ought to start with. We could start with a very short one, or something a little longer. Why don't we go with... Let's do two poets named Wright to begin with. First, we'll do James Wright, and then we will graduate to C.D. Wright, since I used her description in the advertisement for this course. So I'm going to share part of my screen if I can. Let me see, I just want to do screen 3.
Yep, you see where it lets you just share the one window like we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
cool.
and then let me see. Are you able to see that now?
It's loading, it looks like, but
Oh,
theoretically.
okay.
Yep, there it goes.
I see. I meant to... Okay. I'm just going to scoot this over. Okay. This works fairly well, I think. Maybe I can do full screen, see if you get something. No. That's even smaller. Okay, so this is probably the most, the best way to do this visually. Yeah, I'm just going to read this aloud so we can all hear it, and then we can kind of talk about how imagery is working in this poem. This is the American poet James Wright. Has a long title. Lying in a hammock at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly asleep on the black trunk, blowing like a leaf in green shadow. Down the ravine behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distances of the afternoon. To my right, in a field of sunlight between two pines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I lean back as the evening darkens and comes on. A chicken hawk floats over, looking for home. I have wasted my life. So it ends with really a short last line, but one that absolutely packs a wallop. Yeah, so I don't know. I would love to hear just your kind of basic reactions, your thoughts in terms of the images, how the imagery is working, any patterns that you notice, any anomalies or deviations from those patterns, anything of the sort. Yeah, Nisi just chimed in the chat with a great comment, which the last line she said is a volta, which is a term that we normally use when discussing sonnets, but it's perfectly applicable to any lyric poem, really. But that's where the turn in the poem happens with the final line, and I completely agree with that. And it turns there probably for a couple of reasons. In fact, turning is something that we spend an entire week talking about in my creative writing course, because it's very important that poems do that they're not just completely linear or monolithic, but that they have some kind of structural integrity to them, and this one does that beautifully with that last line. I think and we could say it turns there in part because I think that it expresses a sentiment that is unexpected with everything that precedes it, but it's also a change in the kind of utterance that we're getting in the poem beforehand up until that final line. So one of the big distinctions, one of the ways I wanted to define imagery today, in addition to being language that is appeals directly to the senses, any and all of the senses. It can be figurative, it can be literal, it doesn't matter. It's primarily about the verbal function of the language. But also imagery is good to think about in distinction with another kind or another aspect of poetry, which is, see if you can see this. There's image, and then there's voice. Voice, can you see that at all? No, I guess not. Kind of. Okay. I was going to put a poem up there later, so maybe I now will not do that. I will type it onto the screen and share it. Okay, Nisi said she could see it. I feel like I'm not catching all the comments because they're not staying on my screen very well. So Ariel, please bring them to my attention if I have overlooked anything that you would like.
I will. Yeah. Nisi was mentioning about a good volta at the end, and I was just chiming in saying that that's that last line just it's a gut punch. And hi Rob, we have another folk person joining us. Say hi in the chat, Rob, if you want. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no worries. But yeah, the volta, absolutely. And I think that I mean that last line is probably a line that you could read in different ways. I mean, tonally, it's somewhat ambiguous. I have wasted my life. I don't know. How do people? How is everyone kind of hearing the tone of that, or like what do you think the speaker means there at the end? I have wasted my life. I mean, when I ask my own students this question, often students will talk about regret, that perhaps that the speaker has done just what he's doing in the poem all his life and nothing else, and what a waste that has been. But whenever one set of students seems to suggest that, I always have another set of students who thinks like, no, I think it's the other way around. It's more that he hasn't been doing this kind of thing his whole life, and yet he finally indulges in actually paying close attention to his surroundings, in acts of close perception with the natural world. And he hasn't been doing that, but here he's doing it. Therefore, he's wasted his life up until now, when really this poem is the redemptive aspect.
We got Nisi and Rob having hands raised. So,
fantastic. I finally got the
think
chat
your hand
up
was
so I could
raised
see the
first.
chat,
So
but I couldn't see the hands. Yeah.
No, it's all good. Nisi, go first, and then Rob, your turn. So go for it.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so when I'm listening and reading the poem along, to me, I don't really consider it so much as regret or lament, so much as I feel more of just the yearning aspect. And what I really like about we're talking about voice and tone, and the entirety of the poem, except for the last line, for the most part, is showing, and then that very last line is telling. And I think that's what makes it so powerful. And I really think it's just I don't know who William Duffy is, but the title kind of leads me to believe that regardless of where this person, where the poet is in their life, being able to stop and just like existentially kind of take in surroundings, and really appreciate like the beauty that's around. That's where I feel that yearning, like I wasted my life, because why aren't I doing this more? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, Nisi, that's fantastic. I'm glad you were able to chime in so we can see you for a second as well. But that's beautifully said, and I think that's all quite accurate as well. I mean, there could be regret, but I mean, I think that your interpretation of that is perfectly valid as well. I think it's also possible that there could be an aspect of resolution to it, of like, I haven't been doing enough of this, but I've wasted my life, therefore I will continue to pay closer attention moving forward. So that there could be that kind of sense of self-galvanizing or affirmation as a kind of like commitment to this mode of perception. And the fact that it's any and all of those are kind of coexisting in one single utterance, and that you can kind of, depending on how you interpret that, you could hear any of them. And I think all those possibilities are kind of coexisting together in that last line. Also, just going back to the point of Nisi was using the language of showing and telling. I mean, that's basically another version of the exact same thing I'm trying to get at with image and voice. And one thing to think about when writing poems is that, generally speaking, you want to use voice very sparingly. And I think Wright's poem shows it's image, 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 image all the way through, and then voice right at the end. But the ratio of image to voice is overwhelmingly in favor of imagery. And when in doubt, keep your poems grounded in imagery. Imagery is a surefire way to, I wouldn't say just imagery alone, but at least having compelling imagery, you are well on your way to writing a successful poem if you have images that work. Yeah.
Can I also add what you get from the title as well?
Mm-hmm.
That he's lying in a hammock.
Yeah.
And it could be that he's saying, well, I haven't been lying in a hammock enough and seeing the world from a hammock, which kind of would suggest slow down the pace, enjoying. So it could just be that particular image as well, what he's seeing from that particular hammock. I should have been doing this a lot more. It's just amazing what I'm taking in at this moment.
Absolutely. That's great. And then Rob, I saw that you put your hand down, but if you wanted to chime in, I would love to hear your thoughts. And Nisi, we will get to you in just 1 second.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think that Nisi kind of covered many of the statements that I was going to say. So I mostly agree with her analysis of that last line there. And I'd like to say that I generally agree with the latter statement, Jeff, that you had stated that your students would have analyzed this poem as well. I don't see it nearly as an instance of regret, but more so an acceptance of immersing themselves in the present. So, like you said, recognizing all of the imagery around them, understanding that their life potentially has much more meaning when engaged in the present and all of the imagery, and essentially slowing down and removing themselves from the burdens of potentially like the society and the societal constraints that they've worked themselves into over their entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well said, Rob. So glad you added that. Yeah, and Nisi, you had something else, is that correct? Perhaps not. And if not,
I think she went first and she put her hand up.
Okay, I see.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, we're good. We're caught up. We are caught up.
I see. Okay. Well, let's also take a look at some of these images just a little more closely, just because I think we also have to ask ourselves the question of like, why are these so compelling? Oh, I forgot. I was going to say one thing in response to Rob, which was your reading of that, I think, is quite accurate. And one of the things that anytime I read this poem, it's really hard not to hear an echo of a poem by Rainier Maria Rilke about this the severed torso of Apollo, where at the very end he says, "You must change your life." And I think Wright was probably thinking of Rilke when he wrote the ending for this. It's a a different utterance, but it also has it packs a big punch in just in the final line, and it could signal a similar kind of resolution or a kind of shift into a different mode of being. But nevertheless, if we get to the images, what do you notice in the images in Wright's poem? And like, why are these? I mean, this is a poem that has been anthologized constantly over and over again. Why is that? Why are these images so successful? What do you think? Which stand out to you? Is there anything you notice about them? Okay, Nisi said the use of color, and I think that that's absolutely right. If you just kind of look through the poem, you have bronze in the first line, you have black in the second, green in the third. So it's color in the first three lines. So clearly color is important. After that, you have attention to sound, then you get color, and then so you get a field of sunlight, which it's hard not to see some color there, blazing up into golden stones, the golden, and then you have the darkening. So we were a lot of attention to light and color and shades and things of that nature. Rob, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I think the line that stands out to me the most is the cowbells follow one another. And that one's interesting because it's focusing on the adornment of the subject rather than the subject itself.
Yeah, that's great. And presumably the cows are out of sight because it says down the ravine behind the house. So we know that the speaker can't actually see the cows, but he can hear the cow bells. So you're right. It's not primary engagement with the subject, but something indirect through the sound. But it's showing close attention. And in addition to color, there's a lot of spatial awareness in this poem, isn't there? There's over my head to begin, down the ravine behind the empty house, to my right. These things are happening. I lean back as a chicken hawk floats overhead, right? So he's really looking around and is acutely aware of where everything is, both in relation to himself, but also in relation to the other things he's attending to. Good. Anything else that?
Looks like Elizabeth. Yep, I was going to say Elizabeth has her hand up.
Elizabeth, yes, thank you.
I actually thought the cowbells were flowers, and that it was like a personification. They're like people following each other. But there's a sound there as well, because cowbells can be flowers too.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And then in this case, oh, I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
My mind immediately saw flowers,
That's great.
rather than heard sound of one cow after another following each other. And I was thinking, oh, there's just so many flowers, and they're like people following each other. So I thought it was personification.
Oh, that's great. No, I quite like that actually. I've always taken them to be as a sound, but you know what? They don't necessarily have to be. I'm just not familiar with the flower that is called cowbells. I wonder if this might even be a difference between terminology in the States and in the UK. I have no idea, but I like it. It's great.
They're
in that
like
case,
gardenias.
Pardon me? They're gardenias.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that before. That's fantastic, though. I love it. I love what a great name for that flower. And yeah, in that case, then it's very metaphorical of how one would be following the other. But yeah, sure, it absolutely works. I guess the only thing it would leave us with the question would be, how does he know that the flowers are like that if they're down the ravine and behind the house? But In that case, then it almost suggests the fact that he hasn't just been in the hammock all day and he's been like wandering about, or he's looked down in the ravine, he knows what's there and it's on his mind while he's lying on his back here. So yeah, I think all of that works. I think there are little bits that I just want to point some attention to because I think Wright does these things so brilliantly. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly. I mean, bronze is probably not a color that would be among the first bits of or it would not be among the first words that we would probably think to apply to a butterfly in terms of the color. It's somewhat counterintuitive, but that's part of what makes it compelling and interesting. So going back to, I think it was Nietzsche who mentioned the notion of cliche. I mean, I think that probably what you don't want to do is to describe a butterfly in a way that we've already seen before. Talking about an orange monarch, for instance, would not really stand out at all. Calling it bronze is a little bit different. In fact, I'm not even sure what particular variety or species of butterfly we're talking about. Denise said monarch during sunset. Absolutely. And if you've ever looked very closely at a butterfly's wings, there's that like powdery stuff on it, right? That can almost look metallic when it catches the light in the right way. And so just that one color word, just that one piece of diction tells us, oh, and thank you for the Winnie, thank you for the link to cowbell for the terminology. That's great. I love that. But yeah, so it shows a kind of attention. It brings our perception as readers even closer into the quality of the butterfly's wings, not just the color, but also their nature, how they interact with the light. Also, the fact that it's over the head, asleep on the black trunk, which means that so that we know the speaker's lying on his back, looking over his head, and the hammock is tied to the tree trunk, and he's looking up on that tree. And it's pretty shady because it is a black trunk. And so if the butterfly is bronze, the contrast between the bronze, the bright metallic against, and as who was it who said the monarch during sunset? That was Nietzsche, right? So if you imagine some of the light hitting the butterfly, but the trunk is all dark and black, and it stands out in contrast to it, it makes it that much more vivid. And so this is part of what I think makes Wright's imagery so successful. Blowing like a leaf in green shadow. I don't know, green shadow. Have you ever seen a green shadow before? If so, when? When are shadows ever green? Are they green? Is Wright making things up, or what's going on? Because I feel like this is not a common thing. We don't walk around and see green shadows all over the place, do we?
For
What do you
me, I
think?
mean, it's an interesting juxtaposition because it seems like a different time of day almost. Because like when I think
Yeah,
of a green shadow, I'm thinking of, I grew up in Michigan, so like I'm used to like
yeah,
dense woods and things. Like I'm thinking of like
great.
the shadows in the woods. And there's a
Yeah.
daytime version of that and there's a nighttime version of that, but it kind of evokes almost like a different kind of space or like an almost
Mm.
different time of day. And it interests like just for me, but I think
Yeah.
that that's one of those
No,
lines
no,
that
no. Yeah.
like depending on like where the person who's consuming the poem is from, they
Yeah.
might evoke something different because it's so uh it's like environment specific kind of
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. And in some ways, this goes back to I believe it was Elizabeth's point about all of us. There are things that we think of, but we might all bring different things with us as readers to the poem. But I think this is part of being a good reader is paying attention to your attention, noticing the kinds of things you notice, seeing where your mind goes. That's an interaction between you and the poem, which means the poem has provoked a certain response out of you, and all of those things could be of use to you as a reader when relating to the poem or understanding it, unpacking it. I think that's great. And Ariel's point about time, I think, is spot on. In addition to spatial locators, we have a lot of temporal locators in the poem as well, right? So we have, and I think you're right that those first three lines, Ariel, feel kind of self-contained and enclosed. So you're right, it seems to be carving out a different kind of space where close attention can happen. And then later we have follow one another into the afternoon. So perhaps it's earlier when the poem begins. And then we have the field of sunlight with the horse droppings blazing up into golden stone. So that seems like maybe the sun is setting. And then we have the chicken hawk floating overhead as evening darkens. So a lot of time passes, and yet the speaker stays in the same place, which I think you're right that image in the beginning is probably, it has to be there because of the temporal progression of the poem. I don't think you could put it right after or like right before the field of sunlight, for instance, right? I mean, I think it needs the middle of the afternoon in between it because it seems like potentially a morning or late morning kind of image. But yeah, I also think of if you've ever seen like green cellophane, like that casts a green shadow, right? So if you're thinking of very, very thin foliage, there's a way in which some of it it might catch the leaves in such a way, the sunlight, where it would actually cast a green shadow. Or it could also be that the shadow is just a dark shadow, but the thing that it's being cast upon is green. So the green is like the recipient of the shadow, and then you call it a green shadow, right? But either way, it's kind of interesting that like we have all these, there are different ways of unpacking these images, and I don't think that one is better than the other, or we have to elevate one to the primary interpretation, but all of these things coexist at once. And that's why this poem, one of the reasons why it's so successful is that it is so rich at conjuring these imagistic responses to us in our minds. We have, let's see, I'm just going to read some of your comments aloud because I think they're great. Rob says, green shadow could allude to personification of the shadow. It may be jealous of the sun. That's interesting. That had not occurred to me. I like that. Nisi, alternatively. And it could be a stretch, but I think of a leaf blowing away, jealous of, no, you two are on the same page, in fact. Jealous of the butterflies, so perhaps jealous of different things, but nevertheless, green with envy, that's interesting. I think, yeah, also, I mean, one of my favorite lines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I mean, he's taken something that is as low as it gets, right? I mean, this is like fecal matter. It is old droppings from a horse. It's the kind of thing that could have a yuck factor, or, oh, I'm trying to say how beautiful all of this is. I don't want to look at the manure. But instead, he notices how the light hits it in such a way it has an alchemical effect and almost transforms it into something golden, into golden stones. And this is kind of what good, close attention can do. This is what perception does. It changes not the world, but it changes our relationship with the world. And you get the sense that this is exactly what Wright is advocating, and he's probably referring to when he speaks that, or his speaker utters that final line, "I've wasted my life." Okay, just to be mindful of time, I love to read poems very closely and spend a lot of time on them. In fact, I thought we might talk about Ezra Pound's two-line poem, "In a Station of the Metro." I have before spent an entire 90-minute class on just that one poem. But I think we should probably move on to the next segment, which is, I would like all of you to develop an image that could be the basis for a poem or that might appear in a poem. I will give you somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes. Although, Elizabeth, I see that your hand is still raised. Is that from earlier, or did I miss something that you wanted to say about the right poem before we move on? She could be going from train, or
Sorry,
I
no,
see.
it needs to go down. I've literally just arrived back at my house.
Okay,
So I was just closing and opening and closing doors.
I see. Well, welcome home.
Yeah, my hand needs to go down.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, just wanted to make sure I wasn't overlooking anything.
Thank you.
Yep, went ahead and took care of that. No problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So I'm going to give you somewhere between 5 and 10, probably a little less than 10, to develop an image. If you want to develop a series of images, if you want to just keep going, then that's fine. Just take some time to think about writing and creating images and imagery, and then we'll look at a few more when we come back and do a few more exercises as well. So I will mute myself so that I have to stop talking. Otherwise, I will keep going, and I will let you create. So we'll reconvene. I'll give you I'll probably put in the chat, or I'll chime in and say 3 minutes left and 1 minute left, just so you know that those are coming up. But otherwise, have at it. Just write images, imagery. Keep going. Have fun. Enjoy. More soon. Okay, so we are at the 3-minute mark, so 3 more minutes. And just about 1 more minute. Okay, so we are about up. If you're still wrapping up, that's okay. You can go just a teeny bit longer, but I think what I'd like to do now is to just hear the images that you developed. And you're welcome to share these in one of 2 ways. You can read it aloud for us, or maybe I should say not just it, but them, if you came up with more than one, or if you have an extended passage, all of that is welcome. Or you can type it into the chat so we can see it. Maybe you even had it started in a document and you could copy it and paste it. Yes, Rob, you have a question.
Oh, sorry, not a question. I was preemptively saying I'll go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I'm also from Michigan, so this is about a bridge in Michigan.
Oh, cool.
Um, Adorned in glowing euphoria and lacy overgrowth lingerie, the stately space beneath I-196, where nearby naked debris tenderly cups the supple bend of the Grand River, beckons me beside. Petrichor perfume swirls and slips, mixes with the sultry stench of lukewarm light and languid mildew, an erotic concoction brewed through rhythmic exhaustion.
That's great. A lot of really lush language there. I feel like I can visually, I don't know that particular stretch or that bridge, but I feel like I can see all of that quite clearly. Uh-oh, hold on. I'm sorry for those dings. That means I need to turn off my notifications on my laptop. But yeah, really varied diction and like I said, very luscious and highly descriptive, very specific. All of these things are great for building images. Good. Let's hear some more. I'd love to hear what other people came up with as well.
Jeff, do you mind turning your camera on real quick?
Oh gosh, I forgot that it was still off.
All good. Nope, I figured you just
sorry.
forgot.
No, thank you. Yeah, so who else would like to share? Either in the chat or you can read it aloud. Nisi, yes, please.
Um, this is what I had. I'm sitting with my 6-year-old at the Pinewood Birdie, ruffles lingering on his mouth and cheese dusting down his shirt, his flying cub in Class A uniform, antenna ears straining for his name to be called, my little lion, and I am full of pride. My daughter ditches her Weebelo hat as soon as she enters the room, serpentining to her closest friends, crooning all around us, wins over the chatter, and I wonder if I really believe in life after love. I am overstimulated, and so I must.
Wow, that's great. I missed the very beginning. Would you mind reading again, like the very first 3 to 5 lines or something? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sitting with my 6-year-old at the Pinewood Derby, ruffles lingering on his mouth and cheese dusting down his shirt, Cub Scout in Class A uniform, antenna ears straining for his name to be called, my little lion in full time.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, as with Rob's and Nisi's, this goes back to Elizabeth's point about the relationship between images. Images are things that we don't normally just see without feeling something. They usually, right? And Nisi's is full of feeling. And those images help convey that, but they convey it in a language that is more original than if we just say, I was feeling this, and we name our emotions. Instead, it sounds, and you can tell by the kind of attention. I love the image of the cheese dust on the shirt in the beginning, which is like such a little kid thing to have happen, right? So all of those say so much more than if we were to just name things rather than evoke them. Elizabeth, you have your hand up. Ah, there he is. Adorable.
Right. Sitting on my bed like a Buddha, watching the room watch me. A spider plant, spiky green and white legs climbing out from a grey dirt pot, shifting towards milk white light from cloudy skylight. Stark white walls hugging the silver light switch, which is turned to off. Folded pine chair, leaning heavily against wall as if bored. Mirror, slanting off the hook, about to drop, to shatter perhaps into 1,001 pieces. A pile of books towering towards my ceiling, like Babel, ready to fall.
That was great. I love your similes, and especially, I mean, that last one was really fantastic. They were all good though. Pardon me. Excuse me. That is great. Would anyone else like to share? I'd love to hear others. All of these are great. I mean, I love the originality. I mean, Elizabeth, yours, like the gaze of the speaker as she's looking around this room, it says so much about I feel like, pardon me, geez. It just went down the wrong pipe there, and now I'm paying the price for it. But Elizabeth, I feel like that attention, as the gaze kind of looks to different objects in the room and to different places, it says so much about the speakers. I feel like a real sense of personality emerges in part because of the comparisons that are made with the similes, and also there's just kind of a sensibility for like a way or a mode of being that comes across in that. And that's really great. All of you did a wonderful job. Those of you who shared and those of you who didn't, I'm sure you did just as well. But that I like how you're all reaching for compelling language and that you're not going for stock phrases that we've seen over and over again. Some language just gets tired, and when it does that, it doesn't communicate nearly as well. And I think you're all using really vivid language, which is fantastic. Let's see. I think in terms of time, I just want to read one poem very quickly, and then I want to get to a different exercise that goes hand in hand with imagery, which is line break, and thinking about how to use lines to apply pressure on language that you already have. So you could even take the image that you have, and we could talk about breaking it in certain places that would achieve different effects depending on where you put those line breaks. Real quickly, I just want to read this poem by C.D. Wright, one of my very favorites. Let me see. Just need to move this over here.
Jeff,
And
while you're queuing that up, would you
yeah,
like folks to maybe drop a line or two from what they just wrote in the chat so that way we can look at it like as a line for line next
well,
time?
that would be fantastic if you wouldn't mind sharing as much as you're willing to share in the chat. That would be fantastic. It'd be very, very helpful if we could see that.
Yeah, maybe just while you're getting the next poem queued up, folks can because that way we can actually see the line break and see sort of like visually where it would be. That feels logical to me.
That sounds great.
Or y'all can do it while we're going over this next poem too. But yeah, I think for the next part, being able to visually see some of these lines would be super cool.
Yeah, I would love that as well. So this poem, there we go. Nisi put one up there, so I think they're starting to come in. That's great. This is a poem by C.D. Wright. It might be from her very first book, even. If so, it's astonishing how good she was already when her first book came out. The title of her first book was Nisi, that's fine. If your phone does die and you're able to plug back in or join us a different way, just rejoin whenever you can. I think you should be able to be readmitted. So we look forward to you joining us again. The title of her first book was The Translation of Gospels Back into Tongues. If you're familiar with that phrase of speaking in tongues, but I think it's one of the best titles for a first collection that I'm aware of. But so this poem, Tours, I'm just gonna read it aloud and then we'll maybe have a brief chat before we move on to the next thing. Tours. And I will tell you that this is a poem that you should brace yourself for because it refers to a scene of domestic violence. So if that is something that you do, you need to tend to yourself because you don't want to experience this poem, then by all means, feel free to turn it on mute, step away, do whatever you have to do to take care of yourself. No one has to hear this poem, but I do think it's a fantastic poem. So if you are up for it, then my trigger warning is over and I'm now going to read it. Tours. A girl on the stairs listens to her father beat up her mother. Doors bang. She comes down in her nightgown. The piano stands there in the dark, like a boy with an orchid. She plays what she can, then she turns the lamp on. Her mother's music is spread out on the floor like brochures. She hears her father running through the leaves. The last black key she presses stays down, makes no sound. Someone putting their tongue where their tooth had been. I think that's really fantastic poem that is almost entirely driven by imagery. Yet again, very little voice here. A lot of description of the scene, and we don't have emotions named. So going back to that idea of showing versus telling, we aren't told, but we're shown, and we feel like a lot of emotions are evoked. They seem they're almost tangible. So yeah, in this poem, one of the reasons why I wanted to look at this, and if we'd had more time, we would have done a full discussion, but there's a series of similes, and I think that they're all very, very striking. They're striking because they're unexpected. And unexpected description for images, like the bronze butterfly, or unexpected comparisons with similes and metaphors often work. On the one hand, you have to be careful not to make it too unexpected. And if it seems completely out of left field, your reader might be thinking like, what? How is that even applicable here? But if it seems applicable and pertinent to what is being described, and yet it defies the reader's expectations, then it's going to be more successful. I often preface this poem when I teach with a description of red. And we say, this is red like, and then, or red as, and people, the students come up with something. And I often do red as an apple, red as anger, red as a cannibal, red as, right? And you can just keep going. But red as an apple is probably the least successful of those, because I think a lot of people automatically, especially I think if you're in the States, you see the red delicious apple that is ubiquitous in school cafeterias everywhere and elsewhere. But if you take a look at, and also C.D. Wright is also using line breaks brilliantly in this poem. Does anyone know the term for what happens when there is a kind of tension between syntax and line? You get a line break, and then suddenly on the next line, it changes what you thought was happening. An example of this would be W.B. Yeats in his poem No Second Troy. He says, "Why should I blame her that she filled my days?" Line break. "With misery." Or that she would have let, right? And initially you see that first line, you think, yeah, well, why would anyone blame her for filling your days? I mean, what, do you want empty days? Definitely not. But then with misery, right? And we get a similar thing here. And anyway, oh yeah, Nisi chimed in. Enjambment. Nisi has got it 100%. And we have a case of enjambment with CD right here as well. A girl on the stairs listens to her father, and you think, well, what is he doing? Is he like singing? Is he playing an instrument? And no. And then we get the second line, and it's shocking. It's almost violent to us as readers in a way, just in terms of the introduction of that subject matter and how harsh it is. And there's nothing to cushion us for that second line. In fact, if anything, she breaks in a way so that it breaks so that we get the verb with the first word of the second line. So we hit the action of the terrible thing that's being described. So if anything, it really heightens the awfulness of what is being described, which I think is fair because we're getting this from the perspective. I mean, it's third person, but the speaker is sympathizing and kind of identifying with the perspective of the young girl. And to her, this is as horrible as one might think, and therefore I think that's why Wright chooses to use this enjambment as she does. Later, in the second stanza, the piano stands there in the dark like a boy with an orchid. Now that is a very unexpected simile. How is a piano at all like a boy with an orchid, a very skinny flower, somewhat high maintenance? Beautiful blossoms and petals, though. How is a piano like a boy with an orchid? I mean, these two things are far enough apart. What you can't have is have the two things have no distance whatsoever, right? That doesn't work. Metaphor, I mean, this is a simile, but metaphor and simile are quite similar. Metaphor comes from the Greek word meaning to bear something across, to take it across, meaning there has to be a gap that you take the thing across. In fact, in Greece, you can make metaphors at the ATM. It's the Greek word for transfer, essentially, right? But you have to transfer it across something. I think there's also in Athens, I love Greece and all things Greek. I studied Attic in college, but there's a moving company that is like, that has metaphor in the name because you move your stuff across the town from one place, you know. So, in order to go across something, there must be something to cross, and there's often a gap, but this gap is rather wide. A piano and a boy with an orchid? So one thing I think that we can rule out, it's not visually, right? So these two things might be alike, but not because of how they look. A piano does not look like a boy holding a flower. Unless,
Is it
I don't know.
just, is it the innocence? Is there like supposed to be some sort of evoking this sort of like a boy with an orchid, like that kind of evokes like, you know, a boy is going to arrive to try to like woo someone, kind of like there's an innocence to it. And to juxtapose that with the violence of, you know, the violence of domestic violence, I feel like it's an interesting image to throw right in the middle there, because it's an image that isn't violent, it's not scary, it's earnest in a way.
Yeah, it really is. I think you're right. And also, I mean, I think to a certain extent, after that really tough beginning, going from line 1 to line 2, it's really important to then give us a little bit of a respite after that. And I think you're right. It definitely does that. And yeah, I think innocence. I think also the idea that like someone might bring a flower as a gift or an offering. You said to woo somebody, which and I see Nisi brought up perhaps foreshadowing a future relationship potentially, right? Though the difference between the man, her father, who's violent, and the boy who, like, we don't often pair boys with flowers. And when we do, that suggests a kind of gentleness, usually. And it's, again, that's not an expected pairing necessarily. And that's part of what I think makes it such an effective image. But it might also be like you would bring somebody a flower if it was like a peace offering, a truce, a gift, a welcoming, right? So there's that sense of in the boy appearing as entreating to the speaker. And the piano, that means that it feels welcoming to her, right? She feels that is safe or innocent. And the piano, she has positive associations with. The man, the father, not so much. Next line, she plays what she can, then she turns the lamp on, which is interesting that she plays first, then turns the lamp on, not the lamp then plays, meaning we don't know. It says the piano stands there in the dark, meaning she knows the piano well enough to be able to play in the dark, which would say that she's familiar enough with the piano, even though she's young. She has a competence that means it's familiar. She understands it. She knows it. She can play in the dark. It's welcoming to her. Her mother's music is spread out on the floor like brochures. It's a one-word, two-word simile if you count like. But why like brochures? And what else might you connect it with in the poem? What do you think? Brochures. It's kind of an odd thing to compare.
For me, the brochures and then the leaves in the next little couplet there, for me, those evoke very similar. Like if you were to walk through them, the sound is very similar. The scatteredness is very similar to me. So I'm not sure if, there might be some parallel kind of imagery happening that she's playing with there. I think there's probably a deeper meaning there that she's going for, but it works. For me, it works on a tactile level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's these parallel sounds that we get, right? Even though like the music is already spread out when she gets down there. Probably that was something that happened in the fight as she was perched atop the stairs before she came down. You almost hear it get shuffled, especially there's like an echo effect with the leaves afterward. And that's great. And also leaves are of course another word for pages in a book. You leaf through, and they're often called leaves. I mean, Whitman's book, Leaves of Grass, he also meant the pages in the book that he was referring to. So I think that we would be remiss not to note the parallel and connection between those two stanzas. I think the brochures also go back to the title that is tours. And if you think of going on a tour somewhere, you often have a brochure. So we're thinking of going away from the house, maybe to a place where one is vacationing, sightseeing, being a tourist, whatever the case might be. But it's a kind of escape. And so we know the piano, therefore, is like a boy with an orchid, peace offering, an entreaty, something along those lines. And it's also potentially a break or an escape, the music is. And then she hears the father, that's kind of juxtaposed. So they're on the one hand similar in ways, and yet there's a key difference also, since he is the source of all the violence. And then that last metaphor at the end. So we have simile, and then we move from simile to direct metaphor, which I think is important. And then we get the last black key she presses, stays down, makes no sound. Someone putting their tongue where their tooth had been. Fantastic comparison. And this one, while I started saying that the boy isn't serving a visual function, this one does potentially work visually. If you're thinking of the black key as like a gap in a smile where where one tooth is missing, that would be like the black key. The teeth that are present are like the white keys. It also tells us something, again, the specificity of the imagery with James Wright and C.D. Wright, no relation. Franz Wright is related to James Wright, but C.D. Wright is not. And where the key stays down, makes no sound. If you've ever played a piano, it's hard to press the key down and have it not make a sound. What you have to do is press it very slowly. And then when the hammer hits the string, you have to kind of press hard and keep it depressed. And then she's saying someone putting their tongue where the tooth had been. So it's talking about the pressure. And we're also thinking of the mother. Did she have a tooth knocked out during the scene of domestic violence? Or is the girl missing a tooth because she's 6 years old and 6-year-olds lose their teeth? If so, you have two similar things that are, again, juxtaposed to, a girl and a woman missing teeth, but for very different reasons. One is natural and perfectly okay, part of development. The other one is a symptom of the violence in the home. But it also imparts a lot of information in terms of the girl. She might be putting her tongue where her tooth had been. And we kind of know how she's doing that, like feeling out this strange vacancy as the mother might be doing as well. But again, all these comparisons, the imagery, it's all through unexpected language, and it all works, unexpected comparisons. Let's take a look real quickly at, I'm going to look at a poem called the yellow chimney, if I could. So this poem, I've taken all of the line breaks out of the poem. And what I'd like you to do is just take, I don't know, we'll say 4 minutes to add line breaks where you think they should go. Put them wherever you want. In fact, if you want me to, let me just copy the poem and put it into the chat. So if you want to copy and paste from the chat into something on your own computer or device, I will get it right there. There we go. So you now have that in the chat. Take a few and then we will rejoin. Okay, is that enough time for everyone, or do you need a few more moments?
It looks like Rob was able to drop what he has in the chat, so we can certainly start there if you'd like.
Okay, that is great. Let's just go with Rob's actually, and say trust that maybe most people broke in similar places, perhaps. If not, I'm going to put these line break. Oh, hold on, I need to resume sharing. I got these blue line breaks, and I thought that I would actually place them so where they go. So we put one after plume, if we follow Rob's lead. And then I will ask if people came up with different breaks and where they are after we do this, just so we don't go solely by Rob and leave everyone else out. But one after plume, one after smoke, then one after sky. And in fact, that is stanza break. So that's extra significant. And then he breaks after that. That's an interesting break. After brick. After, let's see, after intervals. Very interesting. Okay. After light with the dash, the full M dash. And then after sun and sun. And let's see, brother, and then season is the last one. So, okay. So I had more than I needed. Did anyone else come up with different line breaks? And if you did break elsewhere, where did you break? I mean, in some ways, this is a trick exercise in the sense that I removed all the line breaks, and that's not how the poem was ever really intended to be seen. But so there's really no right answer, no wrong answer. I'm just curious what people did. Did you all break where Rob did, or did you break somewhere else?
Winnie dropped hers in the chat here.
Fantastic. Okay. So these are slightly different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a different color for Winnie's, and I'm going to do, how about green? Can you see this on the screen I'm sharing decently well, that green, or is that too light? Too light, huh? Can you see the blue ones okay?
The blue seems okay. The green, I worry about folks who might
Yeah.
okay, might not do so well with green and red. So maybe like a purple or
I just got a purple. Okay,
I can
so
see that. Okay.
okay. I hope people can see. If not, I think I can shrink the screen that I'm sharing. And I don't know if that would make it so that you could enlarge it or not. I'm not sure how it appears on your side, to be honest. So we have Flesh Pale, after Flesh Pale, and then after Sky. So that one's the same. So I might just put this like right next to that. It's also a stanza break, so that works perfectly. After Strap rather than before Strap. Okay. And then after Wide, interesting. Not at all the same breaks. After Light, that one is the same. Okay, and then after But and Brother, and then Brother is the same, and then it ends with Season. Very interesting. Oh, no, now you can't tell that there are two things there. There we go. Great. Okay, let's see. So if we take a look at where most of the breaks are, and if anyone has any outliers that you want to share, just chime in. Let me know. You can shout them out. You can put them in the chat. Now, this is a poem that is it is relying solely on imagery, really. There's not much that could be said to be functioning as voice rather than image. There is like the there is declaration is voice and not image. We don't see anything with it. We see the plume, and that's part of the image, but the beginning begins in declaration. You could say the declining season, I don't know, arguably, I guess you could say it's naming something, or but really this is all participating in imagery. And so one of the ways in which the poet turns this into an effective poem is to distribute it across the lines in a way that heightens the intensity of what's happening at the level of the language. So if you look at our sample here, we have a line break after plume, which is a noun. Flesh pale is a bit of an outlier because it is breaking after an adjective. Smoke is breaking after a noun. Sky is breaking after a noun. Interestingly, we have a relative pronoun with that. We have strap, so we break after a verb. Brick is after an adjective. Wide after adjective. The break after intervals is noun, light, noun, sun, brother, noun, right? So it's predominantly breaking after nouns with a couple of exceptions. And I think Winnie is actually probably most of your breaks are not after nouns. You break after verbs and adjectives commonly, and some after nouns. and I guess, Rob, you are breaking a few times before verbs. And yeah, it's interesting. But what you often have is after a noun, it is usually followed up with a more minor part of speech, such as a preposition, a minor adverb, an article, a relative pronoun, something along those lines, right? And I think that that means that it's almost kind of natural to break after a noun, because what that means is that you are breaking after a natural syntactical juncture. And that can be perfectly fine. There are times when you definitely need to do that, but there are also times when you probably don't want to do that, because what that means is the line is doing the same work as the sentence, right? So it means the sentence provides a natural place for a pause, and the line decides to break during that pause. And that absolutely makes sense in terms of if you're trying to find line breaks. Intuitively, going to the place where there is the pause is an absolutely natural move. And that's why I think we have a majority of these lines occurring after nouns and before minor parts of speech. But I like doing this exercise because it's really important when you break your lines, not to break your lines out of habit, or to break them unreflectingly, without really giving it some good, careful thought, in part because of the way that lines work. In fact, while I have this poem up, let me just bring up one other. I'm going to William Carlos Williams, poet who is commonly associated with Imagism. And he was known for his imagistic poems and poetry, including, you may have read the Red Wheelbarrow, which, as we were talking about the relationship between voice and image, starts with voice, so much depends upon, and then gives itself entirely over to image. A red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chicken. So voice, image, image, image. So again, a little bit of voice goes a long, long way in a poem. You want to primarily use imagery as much as possible, which is why we're talking about that today. And I love this poem by him, and I realize this is a little bit small perhaps. So, I was hoping I could zoom in. How do I go in? There we go. Oh, well, that was not what I wanted.
You might just be able to hit the little plus sign thing on the middle of the bar up here. I realize you can't see my thing.
It's okay.
Pointer.
I think I got it. So this poem, we're just going to look at one stanza, which is the second stanza. But I chose this because, so to a poor old woman munching a plum on the street, a paper bag of them in her hand. They taste good to her. They taste good to her. They taste good to her. I feel like this is in part William Carlos Williams instructing the reader, here's how you break lines. Here's how you hear them. Here's what they do. And he's kind of enacting it for us. He was a master of the line and the line break, and kind of taking ordinary, simple, unassuming diction, but distributing it across lines in a way that gave it the intensity of a lyrical utterance, of lyric poetry. They taste good to her is the full sentence, just unlineated, right? So they taste good to her, and we think we know what he means, right? She's munching this plum out of a paper bag. These plums, she seems to enjoy it. They taste good to her. They taste good. And with every line break, there's a little bit of a pause as the eye moves from the end of the line to the beginning of the next line. These are short lines, so it's not a long pause. I like to respect line breaks and give them, sometimes there's a little bit of space that kind of, where the final syllables are kind of lingering after the line. has been spoken before we crash into the beginning of the next. Again, this is why that C.D. Wright use of enjambment was so powerful, but also so shocking, because she crashes down on the activity of the violence itself with beat up. And here, you don't really emphasize minor parts of speech like prepositions and to, but her, since she's a character, that does get a stress. So they taste good to her, they taste good to her. So I don't know, that her gets an emphasis. And often what happens in terms of stress is that we start thinking of alternatives, don't we? So this is a rule of English that you have internalized and probably never even thought of, but you already know it because you use it to navigate the world. If, for instance, I was talking about baseball with you, which I'm not quite sure why we would be doing that, but let's say we're talking about baseball, and I happen to be a Red Sox fan, and I asked if you liked, or I asked my interlocutor, we'll say I'm talking to my friend Bob here, and I asked Bob if he likes the Sox. And if Bob asked for clarification, saying the Red Sox or the White Sox, right? And he emphasized Sox, we'd think, Bob, what is wrong with you? Like, did you just wake up or something? What is going on? Have you not had your coffee today? That would be bizarre because he put emphasis on the element that is the same in each case. When really, stress sometimes is used to provide contrast, and we call that contrastive stress. Instead, Bob probably should have said, whoa, wait, the Red Sox or the White Sox? And then that makes absolute sense, doesn't it? So in this case, they taste good to her. Because it gets stressed, it almost makes us wonder, well, who is she being contrasted against? To someone else, they might not taste as good. So they taste good to her, especially because of who she is, because she is a poor old woman. It does have to do with the fact that she's, I don't know, late in life. Do we say poor old woman because she's evoking of sympathy? I'd like to hope not pity. But if so, I don't know. Or is it she's literally impoverished and she lives in poverty and she's eating this bag and like she has delicious food and she's just completely engrossed in this act of eating the plum, and she's given herself over to it in a way that not everybody does, in which case she's enjoying them more closely with greater relish and savor than the unthinking person might do. So she's different than them, perhaps. And then they taste good to her, right? Williams does this by not breaking, then breaking after good, and then breaking before good. And clearly, that's the most satisfying of the line breaks because how good they taste is what is being emphasized. They taste good to her. It gives it a huge load of emphasis. I mean, it's almost as if saying, these plums, they taste goddamn good to this woman, right? I mean, it's like really emphatic. But you get that just with the orchestration of the lines. So now I will close this example and go back to, where did the yellow chimney go? Okay, back to the yellow chimney. And if you would like to know, this poem is actually written by William Carlos Williams. And here is how he broke the lines. There is a plume of flesh pale smoke upon the blue sky. The silver rings that strap the yellow, brick stack at wide intervals shine in this amber light, not of the sun, not of the pale sun, but his born brother, the declining season. These are unexpected line breaks, but every single one of them is strategic and careful, and it has a different effect. Each one has a different effect on the reader and of our temporal experience of the poem, right? If we're supposed to pause at the end of lines, and I think we are, and we're supposed to hear that emphasis in the beginning, then there's both an emphasis or an orchestration of stress, of duration, the way something lingers at the end of a line, and also just how these are broken up into different parts, how they're parceled out in time. So it affects how we experience the poem in time. So I don't know, does anything jump out to you here? Anything that you notice that, you know, maybe if we just kind of break it based on where we think we'll be pretty tempted to break it after a noun, but he almost never breaks it. I mean, he breaks it after plume. There was a plume of flesh pale. Blue is not a noun in this case. It's acting as an adjective. The silver is adjective, yellow is an adjective, shine is a verb, amber is an adjective, not is an adverb, of is a preposition, but is a coordinating conjunction, brother, we have our noun, right? So we have two nouns that he breaks after. That's it. Not only that, he breaks after highly unexpected words, including prepositions and even an article, a definite article of the. So I don't know, what do you make of these? Do any of these stand out? And also, how do they change how we see or experience the imagery?
Rob said in the chat, every instance of color is followed by a break, which I thought was, which I agree is actually kind of an interesting observation.
It's an excellent observation, Rob, and you're absolutely right. Look how many lines break after a color. I mean, arguably pale sun isn't, you know, it's not broken after pale, but everything else, including flesh pale, which occurs earlier, is broken after a color. And I don't know, why do you think that is? What is the effect? I mean, there is a plume of flesh pale, and then there's a pause. Smoke. Why the pause? Why the emphasis? And then upon the blue sky. And it's not only a line break, it is a stanza break, which is almost like two line breaks. Rob, you have your hand up. Yes.
I think kind of just relating it back to your earlier point with your exercise with your students when you're saying describe red in as many ways as possible. These line breaks after color allow the reader to essentially fill in the blank with their own interpretation of what blue could mean, because blue itself as a description could be a wide array of things. It doesn't just have to be a description of a hue. Blue itself could be so much emotion, and this poem in particular, in conjunction with the question that you're asking, reminds me very much of a lot of E.E. Cummings poetry, where he emphasizes color as like a living entity rather than a descriptor.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's almost like a character in some of his poems. Yeah, that's fantastic, Rob. Very well said also. And I think you're absolutely right about the way colors can be just on their own vague and can have so many different applications. And in fact, when we see blue before sky, you could attribute, so whatever is being described, it could be so many different things, right? It could be upon the blue. I mean, yes, it could be sky. It could be a body of water that appears to be blue. It could be a building that is almost all glass, or even has kind of mirrory glass, and it has so it could be against the blue building, essentially, right? The blue glass building, but it gets its blue from water or the sky or another building, or it could be something that is painted. It could, right? A blue mural. It could be, but we don't know what it's attributed to. So part of this is the visual, picturable information that Williams is giving us that is slowly parceled out so that it starts to coalesce across lines. It all comes together and snaps together at the end of the sentence. He could provide that clarity from the beginning, but he doesn't. Instead, there is a plume. You think of what? It's usually smoke or steam, or I guess it could be a feather, right? It could be It could be even, you could call like dust whirling up or something like that into a plume almost. It could be industrial, it could be a fire, it could, right? But there's so many different things. There is a plume of flesh pale, and then we think, oh gosh, well, what does that mean if it's pale as flesh, and only flesh that is pale, because not all flesh is pale, is it either? So then we think of the kind of paleness, and then smoke finally. So we think, okay, it's a pale smoke. Well, that's not terribly common. We tend to think of smoke as being darker. So we have, again, contrast, just as Wright was using, James Wright in that poem with the bronze butterfly asleep on the black trunk. Plume of flesh pale smoke upon the blue. And then you think blue what? Blue sky. And then now suddenly you can see that whole piece of the picture all together. The silver what? Rings that strap the yellow. They're strapping the yellow what? Brick stack at wide intervals shine in this amber light, right? So it's only when we get to the end of the syntax does it all come together, and you realize that there are rings that they're either part of the smokestack, that this smoke plume of flesh pale smoke is coming out of and then is set against the blue sky, but there are these like silver rings that was either part of the design, or it can be almost sometimes you see like those rings are actually a ladder that someone climbs up to get to the top if they need to service it or something like that. But you can start to see all these colors in contrast to one another, how they're all painting this picture. And also just the way he breaks, sometimes he's thinking about, as I said, picturable information and how it's distributed across time. Other times he's attending to sound, the brick stack at. You have the K sounds with brick and stack, the T sounds with stack and at, and also the assonants with stack and at. You have assonants with wide intervals shine, with the long I and wide and shine. You have some of the N sounds and shine in intervals in this amber light. So the light is amber, and it's showing, right, how all these different color descriptors are relating to one another in this scene. But then the poem goes on, not of the sun, not of the pale sun, but his born brother, the declining season. Really interesting. What does it mean that the amber light is not of the sun, and not even the pale sun, which we have the flesh pale smoke from earlier, but his born brother, the pale sun's born brother, the declining season? I don't know. What is the declining season? What do you think of? It sounds potentially a little bleak. But
I feel like as a simple example, a lot of times when I think of the sun's brother, it would be the moon itself.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely we would think of them as celestial bodies with a kinship to them. Absolutely. I think when Williams says season, I mean, yeah, you can almost see how the moon might even potentially be in this scene. When Williams, however, says the declining season, I think he literally means the season as a season, like one of the four seasons. In this case, the declining season, I think it would have to be autumn, or I mean, we even call it fall, which is literally naming it after a declining action, right? So the light is not of the sun, not of the pale sun, but his born brother, the declining season. In other words, this whole poem is working toward a very closely perceived kind of specificity, that the light owes itself not to the time of the day, not to the direction of the sun, but it's a certain kind of autumnal light that you only see in the autumn, partly because of the way the seasons work and the times of day and all of that. But he's saying the whole thing is characterized by this autumnal light. It has this quality to it. He's almost defining something visually for us via something that is very, very difficult to name it. He does all of this based on how he orchestrates these images across the lines, and we get greater intensity that is indicative of the speaker's close attention, close perception to the natural world. If we had further time, what I would do is I would take Rob's description that he shared with us with his image, and see if we couldn't actually work to make the image more concise, then break it across lines to create some heightened lyricism with it. But we're low on time, and I did tell Ariel that I would take questions, and I realize we just have so little time left. I don't know if you want me to try to do something with Rob's, or if you want me to answer questions, but I'm happy to do whatever.
You know what? At this point, like, we got about 4 minutes left. You know, I would love to be able to continue this conversation, and you know, maybe we'll just have to have Professor Babbitt back for a part 2. I think that's what this is telling me. So we'll definitely you know, we'll be looking at that. But I did want to just take, for these last couple minutes here, I did want to give you a chance, Dr. Babbitt, to just, I mean, I'm a podcast listener, so plug your pluggables. Where can folks connect with you? What do you got coming up here? And basically just anything you'd want to share out with the group here, so that way they can, you know, follow you and connect with you if they so choose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going to put into the chat. I have 3 screens going on in this room here. It's kind of fun. I'm just going to put my my website, so you can connect that way. So if you click that, it's just my first and last name, all is one word, .com. And if you click that, my site should pop up. Yes, it does. And if you scroll down on the website, you'll see that I have a sign up for a newsletter, and there's also a contact form. And below the contact form, I have social media. I think most of those accounts are public, so you can just follow, I think, or most of my posts are anyway. But you're welcome to follow me on social media. You're welcome to sign up for the newsletter. I promise you, I do not spam people, so I only send, in fact, if anything, I'm probably guilty of not sharing enough via the newsletter, but I promise I will not overdo it. But you can find me there. And as you can see from the top of the page, I think I have a copy here, but my second book was just released, and so I'm currently in Utah as part of a reading tour to support the book. I've been reading with a number of poets. If you go to events, you can see I actually did a reading last week in Las Vegas, so I was quite close to you. It's too bad I'm not going back that way, but I do some things remotely and online, so I could connect that way. But yeah, if you follow me on either social media or this website, then you will know about things. I'm giving a reading at Salt Lake today, and in Boise, Idaho tomorrow, and then I'm in Missoula, and then Tucson and Tempe at Arizona State is where I end this leg of the tour, and then I'll be resuming in June. For those of you in London, this entire book is about William Blake, who spent the vast majority of his life in London, except for the years 1800 to 1803, where he lived in a small cottage in near Bognor Regis in a tiny town called Felpham. I would love to do something in London with the Blake Society, so I don't know, let me know and I'll gladly fly out there. I love London. It's a brilliant city, one of my favorites. So I'd love to spend time there. But yeah, any other questions?
Well, I think we are right at time, Professor Babbitt, so we're going to have to actually close it out. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, so that way, you know, I have that kind of handled.